There was a woman in my kayak. That would have been fine, except she was wearing a wine-soaked bathrobe, holding a half-eaten cheese board, and screaming something about maritime rights while clumsily paddling away from my dock with my dog still sitting at the end of it, staring back at me like he wasn't sure whether to stay or abandon ship. I hadn't even turned off my truck. This wasn't some lakeside prank. It was the beginning of a full-blown suburban meltdown starring Karen, the newly minted HOA president, and it all began when she decided my private dock should belong to the entire community. Let me make this clear. My dock is not just some planks hammered together over the water. It's the lifeline of my coastal property bought and paid for long before the HOA even existed. It's pristine, it's maintained, and more importantly, it's federally documented as a lease site for the U.S. Coast Guard. They use it for drills, refueling, and emergency maneuvers. It's not subject to HOA jurisdiction, or at least wasn't supposed to be. Karen moved in 2 months ago, freshly divorced, accompanied by a small white dog named Basil and a voice that could pierce bulletproof glass. She carried with her a laminated HOA rulebook and an agenda that sounded suspiciously like a dictatorship. At her very first meeting, she gave a presentation titled, "How to Improve Our Community by Removing Individualism." That probably should have been the red flag. I ignored the glitter-covered letter she taped to my mailbox at first. Something about the dock being underutilized and how it should be available for neighborhood events. I laughed, typed up a polite but firm response, and attached copies of the federal lease, zoning permissions, and my property deed. I highlighted the line that said, "In no uncertain terms, this dock was not subject to future community governance." Karen replied with a handwritten note that just said, "We'll see." I thought it was over, until I came home that weekend and found the dock littered with plastic wine cups, half-melted brie, and a yoga mat wrapped around my anchor line like a sea monster. My dog, Tank, a loyal German shepherd with the heart of a retired mall cop, sat beside it all looking thoroughly unimpressed. Turns out, Karen had hosted a dockside detox with a dozen of her friends, claiming it was a shared community space now liberated from private misuse. There was a dollar store banner on my fence that said, "Community Dock, Namaste, and Chardonnay." I called her that evening, politely but clearly explaining the legal boundaries and the Coast Guard's scheduled arrival the next morning. I told her not to return to the dock. She laughed, literally laughed, and said, "What Coast Guard? You mean those guys in the cosplay uniforms?" I thought they were playing paintball. The next morning, I went to prepare for the patrol boat and saw that she had set up chairs again, moved fuel drums around, and left behind another yoga mat. This was no longer cute. This was dangerous. So I called Officer Ramsey from the Coast Guard. He said, "Send me the footage. If she interferes again, we'll handle it." My security cameras, originally installed for raccoons and lost tourists, now documented Karen dragging patio furniture across my boat cover and organizing what looked like a suburban photo shoot for HOA Weekly. The Coast Guard arrived later that day. 3 officers, full uniform, all business. Karen showed up 5 minutes later with a whistle and clipboard like she was about to referee a regatta. She demanded they present community docking permissions. They explained, calmly and professionally, who they were and why they were there. Karen said, "You people can't just claim a whole dock for yourselves like pirates." When asked if she understood federal jurisdiction, she said she'd check with the board. She then attempted to physically block the boat from leaving. They warned her she was interfering with a federal operation. She responded by muttering something about making a citizen's arrest. That night, she sent a community newsletter titled "A Dock Divided Cannot Float." It accused me of using military threats to suppress neighborly access and included a photo of her in my kayak waving, like she was on a Mediterranean cruise. 2 days later, I found a flyer on my door titled "Community Dock Liberation Initiative" in Comic Sans. Bullet points included militarized water usage and non-inclusive kayak etiquette. Neighbors began to approach me. "Karen says it's just a formality," they said. "Can we take a few photos?" Then came a fine. The HOA board emailed me, demanding $500 per day for denial of fair community access to a water-based amenity. I laughed so hard I almost dropped my sandwich. I forwarded it to Ramsey with the glitter-covered petition attached. His reply, "Got it. Let me know if she escalates." She escalated. Karen stationed herself at the end of my driveway in a neon vest with a sign that said Community Patrol. Then came another Coast Guard visit. Karen met them with a lanyard and demanded they wear wristbands and sign insurance waivers. When they politely declined, she pulled out her phone and narrated a live video calling them uncooperative and possibly trespassing. That evening, an emergency HOA board meeting was held poolside. Karen stood before a giant printed map of the neighborhood with my dock circled in red. Her speech was titled Dock Equity, a vision for shared spaces. When asked if she had legal authority, she said, "They haven't sued me yet, have they?" Enter Gary. Tall, tanned Hawaiian shirt. Former Coast Guard commander. Retired. Moved in last year. Ran into Karen when she told him his American flag was too aggressive. He kept it flying. He said, "Time she meets the right kind of pressure." Meanwhile, Karen posted an online poll. Should we turn the dock into a community boat club? Options: yes, absolutely, and only if wine is served. Then came a night vision footage. Karen, all black clothes, tape measure, taking photos of my dock like she was preparing an expose. She slipped, fell into the water, and then called the police. She claimed I'd hired the Coast Guard to push her in. The officers who reviewed the footage tried not to laugh. One said, "First time I've heard someone call algae a security system." The next day, the Coast Guard arrived in an unmarked SUV with legal paperwork. Karen approached in her tennis outfit, demanding to see inspection credentials. The response? A formal cease and desist order issued under federal authority. Karen didn't speak, just turned and walked away. Until Saturday. Flyers. Dynamic dock day. Wine. Activities. On my dock. Gary looked at the flyer and said, "Let her throw her party. We'll bring the guests." I didn't ask what that meant. When the Coast Guard arrived in full-form boats, boots, water cannon demonstration, Karen stood stunned. Her event turned into a soggy mess of toppled wine glasses and shorted DJ equipment. The next HOA newsletter accused the Coast Guard of traumatizing her guests. She proposed an emergency vote to seize the dock for better stewardship. One board member whispered, "Can you be sued by the U.S. military?" Shortly after, Karen was removed from leadership. But she wasn't done. A drone, a flyer from her nephew, a new lawyer. Claims of unauthorized commercial activity. The zoning office laughed it off. Case dismissed. Finally, a letter arrived from the Coast Guard commander. My dock was now a permanent emergency training site, immune from HOA interference. A bronze plaque was installed. Karen tried once more with a community center proposal, suggesting the dock be converted into a meditation platform. We posted the federal documents on the gate. Karen's nephew filed another complaint. Another hearing. Another dismissal. A reporter asked for a quote. I said, "I think the dock speaks for itself." Now things are quiet. Karen is just another voice in the crowd. Tank and I sit on the dock most evenings, sipping coffee and listening to the waves. Until one day, a new flyer arrived. Color Harmony Council. Proposed ban on shades of blue deemed too aggressive. I looked at Tank. He looked at me. Here we go again.